6 minutes past you from the studios of Adabai 8.9 FM. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Agenda Setting. My name is Major Daniels, and on the program today, I've been joined by APC Chieftain, Senator Anthony Adeni, APC Chieftain, Opumlero, that is Chief DBC, and also I have Mr. Zadok Akintoye on the program as well. And today we'll be looking at agriculture and federalism, or some people will call it decentralization. These are some of the things we'll be looking at as we set agenda for the incoming administration. Let me start from Senator Anthony Adeni. Now, for a very long time, successive administrations in Nigeria have been mouthing decentralization, federalism, but it appears that I don't want to use the word difficult, but over time it has become a campaign rhetoric, as though some people believe that it will not work in their favor for powers to be truly decentralized in Nigeria. Why do you think it has been so difficult from 1999?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Well, we thank God that we are where we are today. I thought the problem we had was that those who are in charge of government were really not sincere about decentralization. They made efforts to improve our agriculture by bringing in what's Anchor Borrower program of the Central Bank of Nigeria. But it was riddled with fraud and favoritism, nepotism. I could remember taking up certain responsibilities on behalf of some of my friends who later turned to be my clients. They completed the forms for this Anchor Borrowers thing, and they were not favored with disbursement of funds. Particularly, I'm sorry, at the risk of being nepotistic, particularly in the South, or let me say emphatically in the Southwest. And around us, I won't name names, but there are quite a good number of agricultural organizations that really imputed or they made efforts to benefit from that Agri Borrowers program or Anchor Borrowers program. After completing the interview and everything they asked them to bring, which they did effectively, you can trust our people, this was not made to them. Like I said, I will restrict myself from mentioning names, but particularly I will mention offices. The central bank was not forthcoming in the disbursement of funds to aid agriculture, particularly in the South. And how can you imagine, don't say I'm getting out of it, that Emefiele could claim that it was the agri people that bought the form of 100 million for him to contest the presidency? You would have seen the mago they were playing in the whole thing.
You were in the Senate between 2011 and 2015.
Thank you.
Surely you will understand the politics of the National Assembly, and from time to time when there were issues or constitutional amendment came up and you had to deliberate on different items in the constitution, oftentimes one gets the impression that items that favor the North always come out at all. Why do I say this? I remember the last time that constitutional amendment was done, there was this particular SMS allegedly from the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives congratulating members from the North that they did well in getting some of the things that will favor the North. For instance, one of the North issues at that time was the issue of increasing what oil developing, oil producing states will get. One of that was shut down. Why do you think, my initial question, why do you think it has been so difficult to get some of the things that we have on the exclusive list on the concurrent list, so that the more powers will be given to states and local government? Why has it been like that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me say you might drink from my knowledge of experience. I was privileged to be part of the Abacha Conference, the Constitutional Conference, 1993 to 1994. And I knew the recommendations we made is still in the document of that conference. I remember when we were discussing agriculture, my contribution was to the extent that the old Ondo state, before it was bifurcated into Ekiti and Ondo, where I came from, I said from Ilaje down to Akono, that the vegetational zones which God bestowed on us were different, and that somebody could not just stay in Abuja to say, I'm the Minister of Agriculture and I want to at least oversee all that happened. That from Ilaje you have the mangrove to Ondo, the rainforests extending to Akure, the rainforest from Owo, the semi-savanna, and then from after Owo to Akoko, where we had the savanna forest, that it wasn't possible for efficacy for somebody to sit down in Abuja and then presided about what goes on
in the states.
I could remember during the time of Olumilua, when I participated, he had a program then that every part of the savannah will be planted 10 meters from the main road with palm trees. And we can do that up to Akono, which is the semi-savannah part of Ondo State. You know, quite a good number of people were not interested in seeing to the actualization of the reality of agricultural practice. While it was easy for you to clear land in the rainforest semi-savannah, it wasn't easy to do the same thing in the what's it called, in the large area where we had mangrove forests, and that people were not interested. And I remember that we devolved education, that it should be concurrent, from the dogmatic belief of being is a federal, it should be in the exclusive list. You know, when you give, it's like when you liken it, we in your studio, when you allow us to function to the best of our capacities, everybody will be able to do well. But unfortunately, in this country, people want to control everything from the center.
Okay.
To say, well, I won't allow you if my friend who's Zadok, who sits by my right, knows how to sing, and I only know how to shout, I won't give them the opportunity of singing.
You shout him down.
Yes. So I won't give him the opportunity of exhibiting his own talent, and that has been our problem. I remember also when we discussed education at that time, people who are not interested in going to school. You will see education or admission into universities should be on parallel or on discriminatory basis. Whereas some people like myself, whose mother went to sell almost all her apparel to send me to school, in some places it's not necessary. They will prefer the almandiri things. So we recommended a lot of things. If you go into our recommendation, it's still in the archive. And I have copies were given to us. We knew this country cannot be going on one lane. That was what informed for some of us at that time to do the little we can, or to recommend. All these things were recommended before Abacha brought in Omobori Owo Conference, Omobori Owo Committee to look at our recommendations. They are still there. They are in the archives. Thank God to what was it? What you can do in sciences now. You can Google them. You will see efforts that were made. So some people are not interested. They are only interested in milking others by staying, operating from the federal. So I think we, by the special grace of God, I don't want to be political.
What would you like to see differently? Not just at the executive level, even at the legislative level in the Asiwaju administration.
Thank you very much. At the legislative level, I would like Asiwaju is already, I think if I can remember correctly, pages 26 to 30 of his article of faith.
Renewed hope.
Thank you. At the legislative level, it will come to place soonest. Balancing, equity, fairness. You know, at the time, what's it called? The presidency of the Senate was zoned to the east, and Ewerem, Nnamani, Kokadibo, Ayim Pius. Notwithstanding their abilities, they at one time or the other came in. So I want to see equity and fairness in distributing those positions, rather than you can start. If you pick a Senate president in the East, if he messes up or he displays incompetence, we can look for somebody else, so that we are not straight-jacketed into saying it must come from this place. And the legislature, at that time, when I was privileged to be there are good eggheads who could perform, but because of these discriminatory policies of saying you are not ranked,
zoning,
you are not ranked, you are zoned, people just fail to perform to the best, or people to the best of
if I hear you clearly, Senator Anthony Deni, are you saying that what your party is doing at the moment, this issue of zoning positions in the Senate, in the House of Rep, that you're not in support of it?
To start with, for people who have been saying, well, Nigeria is not balanced, for fairness, equity, and everything, and because of the federal character provision we have in the Constitution, you still have to patronize all states. For instance, the Commission has it that a minister, or each state must be patronized with the appointment of a minister. Whereas, when we start, I believe things will change. If we don't need more than 15 ministers, why not? We can start by saying, okay, if unlike these ministers, some were there for 8 years, with due respect, doing nothing, by my evaluation, they are not functioning well. I live in the federal capital. I live at least oscillate by living in the federal capital and my home state here, Ondo, Ekiti, and things like that. What really happened? Nobody will be. I would say the Minister of Federal Capital Territory has not performed. When we were in Abuja, when the current Bauchi State Governor was
Bala Mohammed.
Bala Mohammed was the Minister of Federal Capital Territory. Immediately, you observe a road failure. In about a week or two, it will be fixed up. The whole place is dotted with, will I say, gorges.
Now.
And I live in a rural area, Guarimpa.
All right, Senator Adoni. Let me turn to Zadok. Zadok, what would you like to see in a truly federal system of government?
I think the first thing is neither whether we are truly federal or otherwise, because it's a federal republic, and the assumption is that each state is part of is a federating unit within the body. But we know that in practice, that's not true, because we have so much centralized power in such a way and manner that we have made the occupier of any position almost absolutely omnipotent and omniscient in terms of what he or she can do. And so several people have said and have argued that, the Nigerian president is probably one of the most powerful presidents in the world, not necessarily because the country is as powerful as the president, but because the president is almost absolute in his rights, in almost being totally lawless or above the law. I would love to see Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu doing things that are tangentially different from the pattern that we have moved in this country. For instance, in the nomination of ministers, somebody argued this morning that choose between a government of national unity and a government of national competence. And I said that national competence mandates national unity. It mandates national unity because national competence is not geographically located. It means that in every tribe, in every region, there will be people that are intelligent enough. And I must go back to the government of Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. Particularly between 1999 and 2005, before he left office in 2007, you find a government that was truly national to a large extent. You knew ministers. Ministers had the opportunity to, handle their ministries almost independent. They were able to take action. So until politics came in during the battle between him and his former vice president, where they now did institutional changes that ensured that organs of government and civil society that could challenge government were made powerless. But I would love to see Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu bring back that level of independence, particularly to the judiciary and the National Assembly. Because we must have a country that functions organically, rather than a country that functions as if it's the creation of the imagination of one individual. We must have a presidency where young people are brought into governance, for instance, across board, allowed the opportunity, because if you look at the journey to this election, it's been fraught with several epochal events, like the NSAS event, which was a fairly acceptable cry, though unfortunately violent at the end of the day, but a fairly justifiable cry by the young people of Nigeria. So you see that it's not just a cry against police intimidation, it's also a cry for inclusion. It's a cry for recognition that we are existing. So I would love to see him bringing young people into government. People within the ages of 30 and 40 years coming to be substantive ministers. Some of the most brilliant people in Nigeria moving the country forward now are also young people. I would love to see that. I would also love to see us devolving power. For instance, in agriculture that we've been talking about, agriculture is expected to be a local thing. It's expected to be, I don't think it is commonsensical the way we have run it, where we have a federal ministry of agriculture that domiciles the resources from the federal government and then trickles it based on the whims and caprices of whoever is the minister to wheresoever favors him. Like we have seen largely the agitations by Nigerians for justice, for instance in the agriculture sector, is because the occupiers of those offices over time, who have largely been northerners, have always, sort of like given the advantage to their region as against the principles of equity and fairness. So I'd love to see policies that devolve power from a minister handling resources to a minister being more like a coordinator, so that the power comes more to the states where agriculture is local anyway, so more to the states where agriculture of any type is being done, and then to the local government. That would also bring the people into government, because then there will be activities of government that gives them this sense of inclusion. So I would love to see those kind of things being done, and I'm hopeful because what's on his shoulder is probably the first politician that has become Nigeria's president since 1999. Somebody that has been trained in the system, he understands the public service, understands the private sector, and is somebody that truly did desire to be president. So we would expect that within the first 100 days he's bringing in new changes that will calm the heart of Nigerians and give them the sense of hope that if we can just enjoy a little, things may be better in the near future.
All right. One of the things that Bola Ahmed Tinubu promised in his manifesto, and they are referred to by Senator Adeni, the Renew Hope, is things like bringing items like prison, crime prevention, electricity generation onto the concurrent list. And recently, President Muhammadu Buhari signed 60 bills into law. Some of those bills now give powers to states to generate electricity, to have their own prison service, but crime prevention is not part of it. One, let me get your opinion about what you think about some of these bills that have been signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari, especially regarding prison, generation of electricity. Chief Adebisi, what do you think about this?
Well, I think with those bills, maybe we are trying to come back into what you call true federalism, because we have never actually had. They call us Federal Republic of Nigeria. We became a republic in 1963, but have we actually had it? So we have to start with the decentralization. Decentralization, political decentralization, we have to start, followed by administrative decentralization and fiscal decentralization. If we're able to have all that, then I think we're being on the right track. Zadok just mentioned that for the first time we are having a personality that truly prepared himself, that wants to be Nigerian president for the first time.
And a politician.
What we have always had are accidental presidents in Nigeria. Sorry to say that, but that's the truth. So if we work on the true federalism, starting with the political federalism, because what we have is still federalism by mouth or by proclamation, that by fiat, which is just unitary that we're still practicing. Everything we want to do, we have to go to Abuja. My Oga was just mentioning when they were in the Senate and the first Abacha National Conference. See, we have always had good plans in this country. It's not about us not having good plans, but we don't have the good leadership. It's all about the leadership. If we go back into the archives and dust all those conferences, we will find solutions there. But the solution now has to come with the fact that, okay, who is in charge? Because there have been a lot of nepotism in everything we do in Nigeria, and we have to be up and doing. If we want, we generate so much revenue in this country. Unfortunately, the state and local government, they have not actually lived up to the expectation. Who controls the land? The state. So why is the state not in charge of agriculture? Why does it have to be Federal Ministry of Agric? For many people that want to go into agriculture, many of them cannot even find their way to Abuja because they will get lost. Once you go there, so that's why I was talking about political first, administrative second, because administrative goes into the state and local government. Yes, at least we can hear the state, we can see the state, but we are not seeing the local government. That's why people are shouting about local government autonomy. But the local government autonomy has to come with the preparation. When I was in Ekiti State as the chairman of Local Government Service Commission, they have one of the finest civil servants, qualified, more than the state, but they were redundant. If you were looking for the accountants in the state, you go to the local government, they have plenty of them. Why the state was looking for accountants. So these are some of the problems that we have. If we're able to sit down and truly give the local government the autonomy for them to be able to generate revenue, taxes, they can't even levy taxes on their own. Because when you look at the streets, the houses being built, it's supposed to be controlled by the local government, not the state. So if we give this the local government the ability to generate revenue, just the same way the state is generating revenue and the federal is having shares of, the state will be having shares of that too. So we have to, and I know Tinubu has put in a fantastic program, the yearnings of the people, the noise about us having young people. We have always had young people in government in this country. But the problem is, have they allowed them to function? So, and we have to go back into civil education. Because any citizen that doesn't know the history of his or her own people, or of his country or nation, you talk to all these young people today, many of them don't even know the name of the vice president of Nigeria. When we were in school, secondary school, primary school, we do civics. And those are not there anymore. In America, before you can have your first degree, you must study American history. It's required. Either you want to be an engineer, computer scientist, doctor, you must have 6 to 9 credits of American history. Most young people in the universities today don't know Nigerian history. So when we were talking about the NSAS that came up a few years back, which was a genuine agitation, which was hijacked by some people, and you look at it, the nosedive into the last election, where you have Labour Party, okay? But some people hijack Labour Party too and turn into a tribal something. You understand me? It would have been a good movement with that Labour Party thing. But some section of the country felt like they want to have their cake and eat it at the same time. You want Biafra, you equally want to be president of Nigeria. How would that be possible? We're talking about how the northern part has been taking advantage of because what we've been having, look at all the past presidents of Nigeria, minus Jonathan and Umaru Yar'Adua, a military background. So the mentality of you must do this, must do that is there. So command structure. So the northern Nigeria that has been, we always talk about agriculture in the north. I Googled something a few days ago. The largest 10 farms in Nigeria are not in the north. Because when you're talking about farms, it doesn't have to be crop or, Yeah. So you find out a lot of them. Obasanjo was listed as number 1, and another one, Dr. Adeniji, all in the southwest. But Oga talked about the anchor borrower program. Well, I, put an application for that too. I didn't see the light of the day.
I also did. I never saw.
Okay, if you look at the bill signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari about prison service, railway service, generation of electricity, but it leaves out things like crime prevention. That is talking about
Security.
state police.
Security has to start from the local.
And then allocation of resources, and then you mentioned taxes as well. Now, these are some of the things that Bola Ahmed Tinubu promised in his manifesto. How soon do you think it can fulfill some of these promises, especially especially regarding crime prevention, talking about state police, with the kind of National Assembly that we've had since 1999?
Well, the National Assembly that we've had since 1999, they have tried, but
where we have more northerners, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. Even the northerners are not against local police if we know how to put the card on the table. It's a give and take thing. We have to negotiate with ourselves. It's like you want something to be cited in your local area, you have to lobby your colleagues so that you can get it. So when he wants something to you, that's why we need to send people who can actually legislate, who knows the rules of legislation, to the National Assembly, so that they can, when you send people who will be looking at the ceilings of halls in Abuja, you're in trouble. You need to send people who can hold their own and mingle with their colleagues from the north. See, the northerners play politics better than us in the south, but we give it to them. We handed it over to them on the platter, not because they're better than us. Because our people didn't know, they probably can't even understand why am I going to represent my people. You have to know the rules. So parties have to be very careful when you are giving your ticket to individuals to go and represent you. You should put them through certain local debates whereby you will know that these people will not go there and be looking at the ceiling when they get there. We have to play that politics very well. And when you look at some of those things that Buhari is just putting forward now, it's been in front of him for a while.
Why did it take so long?
They are setting a booby trap for the man coming. I even heard people talking about oil fuel subsidy. It's not going to happen immediately unless Tinubu wants to kill his administration within the first 100 days. This thing has to be gingerly handled because it's very sensitive. They're talking about 800 million that will be distributed for 500. Is that the best way to go? The man should just, it's my president, but he should just keep quiet and just ease himself out. And don't try to create problem for the man that is coming.
All right, because of our time, let's turn to agriculture now. We've mentioned some of these issues. Now, Zadok, there are a lot of missed opportunities in the agri sector in Nigeria. Let me mention, for instance, when it comes to yam production, Nigeria is the largest producer of yam the world over, producing about 70% of yam. Now, what we produce accounts for over $13 billion annually. But when you look at the exporters of yam, the countries that export yam, Ghana is number one. Ghana is number one. What do you think is wrong with the structures? Because, for instance, if you could look at the way Ghana does its own yam export, from the packaging, from the selection of the yams to be exported and all, they will have a structure. They have a program called Yam Initiative, and they have organizations, associations that ensure that things are properly done. What do you think is wrong with the agriculture in Nigeria?
I think there's no way we'll find solutions to these things without going back to history. Ghana, you mentioned, is geographically smaller than Nigeria. It's not as complex as Nigeria, particularly with respect to its very recent history. It also had the fortune of having had, at one point in its history, a leader come in to stabilize the country for an extended extended period of time. Nigeria has not had that. The history we talk today about Nigeria is a history largely made from a military perspective. So when you talk about the National Assembly, the administrative structure, power sharing, resource sharing, you will find that they are all created not organically. They are not generic. They are not from the people. They are created from that military perspective of domiciling resources in one central point. And so that has been the biggest challenge to Nigeria's development, because it took the resources from the people. It took the wealth of the nation being defined by the wealth of the people, from centralizing it and then saying that Nigeria is wealthy because government has resources available to it and the people are poor. You see, Nigeria at a time in history was probably the best place for anybody to want to live. We grew up with stories of the massive agriculture in the north central region of Nigeria, the Benue Plateau axis. You could find virtually everything being grown there. They could feed the entire nation. But you see that over time it's been taken away largely by politics and the fight for resources. Now, until we are able to re-establish wealth back in the people, to where the people, the value of land, what I mean by the value of land, what can be produced from the land, the results, the outcomes of that is domiciled in the people that own the land. But Obasanjo, I think in 1979 or thereabout, made the Land Use Act, which took power away from the people and domiciled the ownership of that land in government. That simple decree, what it did was to deny citizens access to what they could use to propel themselves into development. Because if you have land and government says the land belongs to government, there's nothing you can do. You can't use it as collateral in banks. You can't use it to access the resources required for you to make production. So that limits. I think the incoming president should look at that. Because if we want to get it right in agriculture, what we must do is that we must return back to that agriculture that was known as the culture of the people. Not agriculture as a means of producing food to feed the nation. It's about producing food first to feed your locality, then to feed other people. Right now, we can barely feed ourselves because we have to depend on imports. I saw massive industrialization being done in India to produce gari.
Yes, even in China.
That means that they understand the value in those things and they are creating easier access for themselves to dominate. But we are not able to do that. And
there are stories that there are countries in Europe where gari from China now, people prefer gari from China.
Absolutely.
Because better. And Ghana is the stories of how China is finding a way to even demarket the gari from Africa. Because they are saying their own land is better.
They must do that. Look, in nature, nobody.
They would not survive.
Yes, they must do that. You see, Nigeria played the role of big brother in Africa for so long, without looking first at Nigerian interests. And we destroyed, by doing that, we destroyed the opportunities that would have been available for Nigeria. Number one, first thing I think the president should be doing is that any policy of government, either local or international, must be about Nigeria's interest. Anything that's not going to develop, and I want to go back to something that Obasanjo did between 1999 and 2003, when fruit juices used to be imported, and then he banned it. Today we have massive, more than enough capacity to refine our own fruits here. Although, unfortunately, most of it is still being brought into the country as concentrates. But you know, if you stop the importation of those concentrates, for instance, if you want to market anything in Nigeria, you want to market wine, some of the most expensive wines in the world are marketed to Nigerians. We consume some of the most expensive champagnes in the world. You must force a way where a part of the production process is domiciled in your country. You don't need to have the technology. Once the technology comes to your country, then you do reverse engineering. That means you look at the equipment, you begin to produce part of the equipment until you are able to produce all. That's how nations like China, but because we've had, unfortunately, presidents who came into power not because they had any evidence of intellectual capacity, but because they were military men who had lazy opportunities as military generals to control. Most of them never even went through the ranks. Most of them became generals before they were 40. Most of them were given for free. Most of them were a product of the Civil War. They were not tested in anything. Really. They were just administrative military men who did not even understand the country they were ruling. That's why today when you talk about injustice in Nigeria, the greatest evidence of injustice is at the National Assembly, where we agree that the North holds the majority in a country that is as polarized as ours. And that majority was created by the military, deliberately. To ensure that nothing can be done in the country without the support of the North. That's why they will balkanize one state into three, give them the same number of representation, 3 times the representation that they are required to have. So if we are talking about moving forward, we must also talk about how do we conquer the history that has brought us to this point, where you have to wait for somebody in Abuja to determine what happens in Arimogija. It does not make sense. The man may not even know. You are talking about a locality he's not even aware. So if the president can also try and help revive the local government, some of our best brains have no business going to the national. Because the best, if for instance I die now, you want to be buried in your local government. So village. If you have the intellect, it's your local government that you are supposed to go and administer. Yeah. Because it is where you make well that you are eventually going to die. So, but the local government has been, almost. Sorry
to cut in because of our time. Now, what structures would you like put in place to ensure that some of these missed opportunities? I'm not just talking about yam now. We've had stories about how Ghana comes to Nigeria to buy yams and then repackage and export.
Yeah.
Because you wonder if Nigeria is producing 70%, where does Ghana get its yam from? If Ghana is the largest exporter of yam. So what structures would you like to see the Tinubu administration put in place to ensure that some of these missed opportunities are not...
I mentioned we must have a Nigeria first policy. That policy must be effective from the first point of entry into Nigeria from our borders. We must ensure that as much as possible, when goods and services are being removed from Nigeria as raw materials, there must be something left in the country. For instance, you are coming to take our yam because you don't have capacity. So it's either we are pricing our yam in such a way and manner that will make it competitive for us to have the benefit from it. If we don't do that, then we will be rendering the farmers, the local farmers here, we'll be rendering them poor at the, making another country better. We must find ways of ensuring first and foremost that we protect ourselves, our country. We must protect ourselves against neighboring countries. We don't have any business helping the economy of Benin Republic to work. We don't have any business like that. We don't have any business having to sacrifice our own patients, our own people, for other countries in Africa to work. We must first of all make our country strong enough for other countries in Africa to accept, to submit. For instance, look at what we did in Liberia. Nigeria paid for most of the recovery in Liberia. Nigeria paid the price for Liberians to be stabilized after their civil war. But how have you exploited that to the benefit of Nigerians? We don't own companies there. America won't do that for you. Yeah. If America invests money in helping you to get stability, you'll find that most of the infrastructure, most of the engineering, most of everything being provided there will be from Africa, from America. Yeah. We've not done that. That's why countries in Africa are taking advantage of us. People are taking our oil to their country and using it, and we are not looking at how do we exploit them. So that, look at what's happening between the US and Mexico, or between the US and some of the countries around it. The US ensures that it's an American first policy. If an American is protected, any other person, if you don't feel secure in your country, then become an American. That's what they do, and that's what we must do. If you don't feel secure, if you can't, for instance, Benin Republic, if you can't feed yourself, then become Nigerian. Then come and become a Nigerian. Bring your resources to our country, nationalize, and then use your intellect. That's what any developed nation will do, and we must have to do.
All right, because of our time, one of the things that Tinubu promised, one of the things that he promises in this manifesto is establishment of farmer cooperatives. And he says that will help the farmers to access credit, to help them to access grants as well. How effective do you think these will be, Senator Anthony Adeni?
Thank you very much. It has been put into practice. If you look at history, cooperative FCM, we always find them in the cocoa stores and in these agri things. For instance, like the yam, I'm sorry to go back to it, Ekiti.
In Odoro specifically.
In Odoro particularly, we established a farm of
we established something at Elisha.
At Elisha, thank you.
You know,
which was
that
cannibalized.
Yeah.
To package, to process,
dry
exportation of yam,
yeah,
and things like that. Recently some pieces of yam were exported to America, and before they got there, they had already been, they were spoiled. And I think it should take us to our post authority, where you export these things. When Governor Fayemi was saying he was establishing an agric belt, and apart from that, an airport that will cargo agric, if it has been appropriately done, these things will have at least swung into action. And I think Tinubu knows. Before now, we know what we had. Chief Obafemi Awolowo established farm settlements, and I knew one of my brothers who was at Elisha and later graduated into Ori, farm settlement. And monies were made available through these cooperative societies. People were aided, people were assisted to enhance production. And when you look at what is happening at IITA, you discover that if such extension services are extended to state, and I'm sure, like
it is in the manifesto.
It's in the manifesto, yes.
And one thing we need to do about those extension services is, when we allocate money to these extension services, 80% of the money allocated goes into overhead and not into research.
Into research, yes.
We need to do more research. We have a lot of agri-extension workers all over, redundant. So when you were talking about how Ghana was able to capitalize on exportation of yams, most of those yams being exported by Ghana are produced in Nigeria.
Come from Nigeria, yes.
I in my own hometown, on market days during the yam season, you will see nothing less
Tons.
than about 30 trucks to 50 trucks.
At the moment, Nigeria produces 50 million tons annually.
Okay. So,
and cassava.
And we're talking about how do you preserve these yams? The same thing you can use to preserve the yams, you can use it to preserve the cassavas too, and all that. We have two different. One was built in Elisha by Engineer Oni. Another was built in Ayedu by Fayemi. They are not functioning. So we need to be able to, once we start these things, make sure we complete them. And make sure, that's why I was talking about administrative decentralization. It's very important. It works with the state and local government.
What about commodity boards? Because it's also in the
commodity boards will be revived. My father was a cocoa merchant in those days. They have this cooperative that I was talking about. In the Ikole, they call them Ikole Mishi Trading Council. Because when we were talking about cocoa in those days, from the old Ondo province, majority of this cocoa were coming from Idonre, Ise, Ekiti, and most of those places now, if you want to grow cocoa in my own area now, people burn them. Those people that are cultivating yams, they don't want the cocoa. So there are a lot of things we have to, and that's where the local security comes into place. Because when you're talking about food, you're talking about security. So the local security has to be put into place that will guide and help these farmers so that they can, and our research institutes needs to do more. It's not just about buying pickup trucks and all this for the officials.
Okay, on the final note, one of the things that I also see in the manifesto, establishment of fresh produce storage facilities in major marketplaces in towns and cities to minimize waste and better preserve perishable food items. What do you think about this, Zadok?
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
Except because when you talk about fruits, there's they have a very short life cycle, and if you consider how huge Nigeria is, except you want to centralize that or you want to take care of that particular issue in some regions, which would then create bottlenecks, administrative and judicial bottlenecks and legislative bottlenecks. I think it's better to begin to encourage. There are things that we consume here, a lot of soda, a lot of juice that are imported as concentrates. Once we ban concentrates, you force those companies abroad to set up plants here to create their concentrates here. And when they are setting up here, they will want to, reduce the distance between the farm, those who are producing those fruits. If you go towards the Kogi axis, you see a lot of cashew there. If you go to all these places. So if you can, ban some of the easy options that we have and don't allow them. For instance, in vehicles, for instance, I've said it, I would hope that the federal government under Asiwaju would put heavy duties on any vehicle above 4 plugs. The reason being that they must be classified as luxury, because when we do that, you force people to use vehicles that have lesser consumption of fuel, that are cheaper also. You understand? We must look at things like that. Instead of creating infrastructure across the country to store fruits, just ban importation of concentrate, force the companies sending concentrate, force them to come and set up here. It will create jobs. It would also give, less bottlenecks.
On the final note, Senator Anthony Adini, we've had a minister like Akiwumi Adesina joining the Jonathan administration. And it appeared that it did not achieve much, because it appeared that it was all talk. What kind of Minister of Agriculture would you like to see in this incoming administration?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I think culturally, most of us are agriculturists. Culturally. For instance, I have a farm. I know Otumba has a farm. I don't know Zadok.
I am a farmer.
He's a fish farmer.
I'm a fish farmer too.
Okay.
So I think the president-elect, when considering his cabinet, should look inwards and make use of the local people rather than bringing somebody from the World Bank to come and handle agriculture.
And speak all the grammar.
Cassava bread, yam bread, and things like that.
And cassava bread would have been a good one for us.
Maybe you can also look at the option of not centralizing, allowing the ministries of agriculture in the units to be more
effective.
Take the resource away from the center, give it to the units.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Ronte Adebisi, for coming
on
to this edition of Agenda Center. Senator Anthony Adeni, thank you very much for coming. Mr. Sadok Akitoye, thank you very much for coming.
It's always a pleasure being here.
This is where we end it today. My name is Decentralization. Thanks for listening.